Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since my last video, but now I'm back, and that's with a review of the brand new slugs from ZAN. ZAN has just introduced a slug line in the 177 caliber, and the weight goes from 10 grains through 13, 16 and all the way up to 20 grains. And the ones that I'll be testing out today are the 13 and the 16 grainers. I'll be testing them out at 3 different distances: 34, 75 and 100 meters. And at the end of the video, I'll be doing a penetration and expansion test in a bar of clay. The gun that I'll be using for today's test is the FX Impact M3. It's pretty standard. It does have the dual bottle system here. It has Element Titan on top, Huma moderator and some different Saber tactical parts. I'll tell you about the tuning later, so now let's start the shooting right back here in my backyard at 34 meters with the 13 grainers. The gun's been set up at 34 meters here in my backyard now, which by the way is perfectly legal here in Denmark as long as it's performed in a safe way and you don't exceed the 177 caliber. But let's see what the accuracy is like in the 13 grains ZANs at this distance. Okay, let's go check it out. Okay, so this is how it looks. I don't know if you can actually see it, but yeah, I can't say that I'm too impressed by it. I have shot some better groups, but anyway, this is the one I shot at the test, so this is the one that we're gonna stick to. Let's move on to 75 meters. Now the gun's been set up at 75 meters. And for those of you who's been following me for quite a while, you know that there's a change to my gun. I've been using the 700mm liner for quite some time, and now I'm back to the 600mm liner. The reason for this is that I had quite a few issues around the spread on the 700mm liner. So immediately after changing back to the 600, my spread improved quite a lot. But to get the last accuracy out of it, I actually changed the transfer port as well. So you know how many times on this channel I've mentioned the dual hole transfer port, but now I'm back to the original transfer port. So doing that, my spread was down to between 5 and 6 on a 10-shot string, whereas with the 700mm liner and the dual hole transfer port, I could easily have a 30 feet per second spread on a 10-shot string. So now I know why FX does not mount the transfer port that they do in the bigger calibers with both the pellet port and the slug port. The last thing I want to mention is that today I brought 2 cameras but only 1 memory card. So you're not going to see me sitting here while I'm shooting. I'm only going to put a camera down at the target. So let's go down and set up the camera. Did you see what just happened there? It was a 1.2 centimeter group at 75 meters. And I mean, this is quite incredible, and it's about the best group that I've ever shot on 75 meters with any ammunition. And on top of that, I did it in the first attempt Usually when I film, I can take like 2 or 3 groups and then take the best to see what kind of group that you can expect. But I've never done anything like this, and never in the first attempt. So I just hope that it's gonna be the same at 100 meters. So let's move the whole thing to 100 meters and give it a go. Now the gun's been set up at 100, so let's go down and set up the camera at the target. So here's the result of the test of the 13 grain sands at 100 meters, and it looks like this. I'll put a picture here. It's a 3 centimeter group, so just 1 millimeter shy of 1 MOA at 100 meters. That's definitely acceptable. For this test of the at 100 meters, I actually had 3 attempts. The first ones, well, always there's always excuses, but there was one that got away from me. It was me. I don't know why, but on the next one I ran out of slugs, and the next one, the third one, was this. And taking into consideration that my very best group ever at 100 meters is 2.2 centimeters, and that was after like a ton of attempts. So being able to shoot this just almost out of the box and shooting a MOA at 100 meters, that's definitely acceptable. So verdict for the ZAN 13 grainers is that they definitely passed the test. And if I have to compare them to something that's close, it is the JSB knockouts at 13.43 grain that I'm usually shooting. And I'm not sure if it's a tie or this one is better, but they're definitely not worse than the knockouts. So definitely acceptable. My settings for this test has been the regulator at 106, the front valve at just past 4, and my macro adjuster like this. So with that said, let's go on to the 16 grainers. Now back here at 34 meters, ready to start testing the 16 grainers. But before I start shooting, there's a few things that I forgot to mention about the 13 grainers. For once, I forgot to mention the velocity that was 980 feet per second. I tested them all the way from 920 and all the way up to 1,000 feet per second. And there were a few places where the accuracy was promising, but since around 980 is the place that I'm usually shooting my slugs, I decided to do the fine-tuning around there, and yeah, as you can see, it worked out pretty well. One more thing that I want to mention, and that's from both the 13 and the 16 grainers, is the weight. I recently did a video on if it made sense to weigh your ammunition, and it actually showed out that there was not too much difference. But anyway, I kind of stuck with the idea that I like to weigh my slugs. But with the 13 grainers, it's not necessary, because the spread of the weight in the 13 grainers is only 6 milligrams, whereas in the JSB knockouts in the 13.43 grain, they are all the way up to 25 milligram. So it just tells me that the manufacturing process of the ZAN slugs is very, very good. And for the 16 grainers, I weighed like, I think, 100 slugs, and the spread of the weight with those were, I think it was 12 milligrams. So once again, the manufacturing process of the ZAN projectiles are very, very good. So with that said, now let's get into the shooting and testing of the 16 grainers here at 34 meters. That was respectable. Let's go and check it out. That was very, very decent. Looks like this. And measuring it up, have the calipers right here. It is, yeah, exactly the same as the group that I shot with the 13 grainer. So that's promising. Let's move on to 75 meters. Now back in the forest and ready at 75 meters. So let's see if we can beat the group of the 13 grainers. Okay, let's go see how that went. So, this was not too bad. You can see it here, and you can see it here. It's a 2.3 centimeter group, so it didn't beat the 13 grainers, but I would say I didn't expect to beat them. But anyway, this is pretty good. But I will say that the 13 grainers, they seem more inconsistent. It took quite a few tries to get here. Not that the groups were much bigger, but they were bigger than this, and this might be my fourth or fifth attempt or so. So not as consistent as the 13 grainers, but let's move the whole setup out to 100 meters and see if they can outperform them there. So setup's been moved to 100 meters, so let's see how it performs here. Okay, let's go and see how that went. Back with the target from 100 meters. Looks like this or like this. It is a 5 centimeter group, and to be quite honest, this is not the only group that I've shot today. I've shot a lot of groups, and this 5 centimeter group is the best. So the verdict from me is that the 16 grainers at 100 meters didn't pass the test. They were shooting well at 34 and at 75, but I will say that I expect more when I'm going that much up in weight. The tuning of the gun has been the regulator at 134, and that is what I need to shoot the slugs at close to 980 feet per second. And some might say, it's way too fast and everything, but I've like with the 13 grainers, I've shot them at the range of between 900 feet per second and up to 1,000. And once again, close to 980 feet per second was the place where they performed the best. So I've done my very best, and I think I'm pretty capable of tuning a gun. Shooting the NSA 15 grainers, for instance, easy to tune, and shooting much better groups than this. So verdict for the 16 grainers is they didn't pass the test, and I'm not gonna buy them again. But talking about the 13 grainers, they performed very well, and they are my new go-to slug in that weight class. They performed well at both 34 and especially at 75, and they shot MOA at 100. So with a little fine tuning, I think that I can shoot the best groups that I've ever shot with those slugs within like a month or two. So that's my verdict for both the 13 and the 16 grainers. And with that said, let's go back to the penetration and expansion test. An FX Impact M3, bar of clay, and a whole lot of slugs. That sounds like a lot of fun to me, so let's get started with the penetration test. I'll measure 3 different kinds of values: penetration, cavity, and the expansion of the slug. Here you can see the results of a test that I did last year. It consists of different kinds of pellets and slugs, and as you can see, there are 3 different categories. There are the regular pellets, the hunting pellets, and the slugs. If you take the regular pellets, you'll see that they penetrate pretty deep, and the heavier the pellet is, the deeper they penetrate. But the cavities that they make are not all that big. Going to the hunting pellets, we see a slightly bigger cavity and a bigger expansion of the pellet. Going to the slugs, you can see that they do not penetrate so deep, they leave a bigger cavity, and the slug itself expands quite a lot. I'll leave a link to the test at the end of the video. So with that said, let's start the test, and we'll start with the 16 grainers. Makes such a funny sound. Okay, let's go and measure it up. The 16 grain slug left a cavity of around 50 millimeters. It penetrated the clay around 76 millimeters, and the slug itself expanded 10.28 millimeters. So that's the biggest expansion we've seen of ammunition in this test so far. Next up, and the last part of the test, is the 13 grainers. Let's check it out. The 13 grain slugs left a cavity of around 45 millimeters. It penetrated the clay just short of 69 millimeters, and the slug expanded to 10.19 millimeters. The penetration and expansion test of the ZAN slugs went extremely well. What you're looking for in a slug, if you want to use it for hunting, is a slug that leaves a big cavity and doesn't penetrate that deep, and a slug that expands like these ones does. Bear in mind that I don't do hunting myself since it's illegal with 177 here in Denmark, so my knowledge is purely based on my YouTube knowledge. But anyway, if you compare these ZAN slugs to the rest of the pellets and slugs that I've tested, you'll see that these are very, very good. They show huge potential both in 13 and the 16 grainers. So for this test, I'm not gonna pick a favorite because I don't know too much about it, but I'll make you draw your own conclusions here. So that about sums it up for the grand test of the ZAN slugs. I hope you liked it, and if you have any comments or you have some experiences, you're welcome to share it in the comment section below. What I've learned from this test is that the 13 grain slugs are just so good. They did well on all distances, and the penetration test was a blast as well. The 16 grainers, they had some troubles when you were shooting at 100 meters, and yeah, as I said, that's enough for me to disqualify them. But anyway, the 13 grain slugs is definitely my new go-to slug. Or is it? Because the next test that I'll be performing is with the new slugs from H&M, and I'll be testing them in the exact same way in 13 and 16 grains. So let's see after that test if the ZAN 13 grain slug is still my go-to slug. So this is Peter P, Viking Airgunner, signing off. Take care and shoot safe.